Welcome back to Swordman Josh Gaming, and as promised, I'm going to go over the deck tech that I used for my sealed pre-release that I took 8th place in on April 27th. So we will go through this by going through the 1-drops of the creatures, and then any spells that were 1-drops, 2 drops of creatures, any 2 drops that were spells, and moving forward, and then give an overall idea of how the deck ran. So in the 1-drop spot, I had 1 copy. I ended up playing green-blue. It's just kind of where my cards led me to. I did pull a Massacre Girl and a Dread Horde Invasion, but I didn't have the rest of the black needed to support playing any combination of black. So here we go. My first card that I played was in my 1-drop slot. 1-drop slot was an Arboreal Grazer. It's 1 green for a 0/3 creature with reach. This is not a defender, so if you put some +1/+1 counters in it, it can attack, and it did it more than once. And when it comes into the battlefield, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. As a 1-drop, I got this as a 1-drop in 3 of my games out of 6 rounds. And it made, it's basically my only ramp, I think, in the deck. And it made things a whole lot easier. I take it back. I have 1 other creature that's ramp. So this helped out a lot. That's my only 1-drop in terms of spells and creatures. So we'll go ahead and go on to the 2-drops. In the creature category, we had 2 copies of Erratic Visionary, which is a 1/3, so it made for a great wall in the early games. It's 1 blue, 1 colorless, and for a blue and a colorless, you can loot, so you can draw a card, then discard a card. So it allowed you to dive deeper into your deck and allowed you to have your defenses up really early. For those that have not paid attention, this is built around a lot of proliferate, and amass is the new mechanic. So I pulled 1 copy of Pollen Bright Druid, and it's a 1/1 for a green and a colorless, and when it enters the battlefield, you have a choice. You can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or you can proliferate all things. So she did. In the beginning, a lot of times she'd end up putting with a +1/+1 counter, like on the Arboreal Grazer or something like that, so you had a 1/4 out early. But in the late game, her proliferating would make a huge difference, and we'll get into that here after a little bit. And then one of my few ways of dealing with with flyers was a spider. So a green and a colorless has 1/3 in reach, but whenever it blocks a creature with flying, it gets +2/+0. So this stopped quite a few board states, especially for the flyer that amasses 1 when it comes out. There were a couple different flyers in blue that I saw quite a bit of, and he shut those guys down. And the 2-drop spells, they are actually all blue. So we played 2 copies of Callous Dismissal. I didn't have a lot of removal. This is where my removal kind of sits. But it worked for getting rid of zombie army tokens, but also worked on getting rid of creatures that had a lot of +1/+1 counters. So it's a blue and a colorless. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand and amass 1. And this actually saved my creatures once as well, and I will get into that at the end. I used a pretty weird combination, but it did allow me to win the game. So our next 2-drop that I had was Contentious Plan for my card draw. It's a blue and a colorless. You proliferate, and then you draw a card. So a great little card draw. Wish I had pulled more than 1 of these. I didn't have a lot of card draw in here. And I didn't have a lot of removal, which is probably the reason that I took 8th place rather than higher than what I did. I just didn't have the colors to support it. One of the rares I pulled, and only got to use once, was Narset's Reversal. So it's a blue-blue, copy target instant or sorcery spell. Return it to its owner's hand, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Actually, I may have got to use this more than once, but only once did it truly make a difference, and somebody was trying to prison one of my planeswalkers, and they only had one creature on the board, and I reversed it and I prisoned their only creature and then walked right over the top of them. And then the only foil, except for the only non-pre-release foil that I pulled, was Kasmina's Transmutation. So it's a blue and a colorless enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 1/1. This card was absolutely amazing and sealed. It shut so many things down. And this is one of the only ways to get rid of the God cards because they lose all abilities. So they don't get shuffled third from the top into their library the way that I understand it. So that's the 2-drop spells. 3-drop creatures, I had 2 of them. I had Arlen's Wolf, which is a green and 2 colorless, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. It's a 3/2. Just something I needed to round out my creature and curve. I wish I would have pulled more 3-drops, but I didn't. So then we have Vivian's Grizzly, which is a 2/3. And for a green and 3, you can look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker card, you can reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, then you put it on the bottom of your library. So another card that just allowed me to dig deeper faster, especially when I had the mana to support all of my bigger spells. At the 3-drop for spells, we had 1 copy of Stealth Mission, which just got me in for a kill on at least 2 games, if not maybe 3. But you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and then that creature can't be blocked this turn. So it makes an unblockable creature for 1 turn. The next one was 1 copy of Courage in Crisis. So you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, and then you proliferate. So at least for 1 green and 2 colorless, some creature of yours is getting +2/+2, but generally it's a whole lot better than that. At our 4-drops, we only had 1 creature at our 4-drops, and it's the Centaur Nurturer. This is the only other mana accelerant I had, mana dork if you will. So it's 1 green and 3 colors. It's a 2/4, so it's got a pretty big body on it. And when it enters into the battlefield, you gain 3 life, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. There's not a lot of instants in this set, so it didn't help a lot in terms of being able to do things on your opponent's turn, but it did help me ramp out into 5 and 6 mana casting cost stuff. And it did great as a defender, and a lot of times it got a +1/+1 counter from somewhere and then started proliferating, and by the end of the game it was a 5/7 or a 6/8 and was doing damage. Our other 4-drop was Crushed Descent, 1 copy. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2 extra mana, and then amass 2. Sadly, this never really got to shine like I hoped it would. With it being the sealed like this, people were running so many lands that most of the time when you countered a spell, they'd pay the 2 land, it'd stop them from doing an additional action that turn, and you amass 2, but I think I only ever countered 1 spell with this. Then we have our 5-drop creatures. Our first 5-drop creature is Eternal Skylord. It's a 3/3 zombie wizard. When it comes into play, you amass 2, and then zombie tokens you have flying. This allowed me the evasion to be able to close out at least 1 or 2 battles after that zombie proliferated and amassed some more. And it also was one of only a couple ways that I could deal with flyers coming at me. The next 5-drop that I pulled and played was 1 copy of Thundering Ceratok. It's a 4/5 with trample, and when it comes into play, other creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. The only thing I wish there was about this card was that it had haste as well, so it could attack on the same turn that all the rest of your creatures were trampling in on. That actually lost me a game because the Ceratok could not attack on the same turn as the rest of my other creatures trampling in. Then we have a 6-drop creature, no 5-drop spells, a 6-drop creature with 1 copy of Kiora's Dam Breaker. It's a blue and 5 colors for a 5/6, so a big beefy boy. And when it enters the battlefield, simply proliferate. Now I got a couple extra cards over here. These were cards that made a big difference, and also my 2 promo cards are over here. So the first one I have over here is I got 1 copy of Ujin's Conjurant, which is an X mana cost, and when it comes into play it gets X +1/+1 counters, and if damage is dealt to it, then it loses that number of +1/+1 counters. So if it's a 3/3 and it's dealt 2 damage, it loses 2 +1/+1 counters and becomes a 1/1 creature. This is one of the cards that I used with the stealth mission and gave it 2 extra +1/+1 counters, made it unblockable, and managed to attack in for the win with this card after I think I cast it for 8 mana and then gave it 2 more and made it a 10/10 unblockable. So it was just a really great card because no matter where you're at in the game, no matter what your mana ramp is, you can play it out there and you can have something to work with. So the next card I have over here, and the last creature, the other 3 are Planeswalker, is my promo card, and that was Rolesk Apex Hybrid. 2 green, blue, and it's Flample, or Frample. It's a flying trample 4/5, and when it comes into play, put 2 +1/+1 counters on another creature you control. And then when it dies, proliferate, then proliferate again. I probably would have won a whole lot more rounds, except for the fact that you don't get that double proliferate trigger if this card gets exiled. And there are a lot of cards in this set that instead of destroying something and sending it to the graveyard, it exiles it instead. And out of all the games I played, 6 rounds, I think I probably played 15 or 16 games. This card never made it to the graveyard. It either won me the game or it got exiled. And the games that it got exiled, most of the time, I didn't win that game. I shouldn't say I didn't win. It was probably a 50-50 split. So that was my last creature. Now, my other promo card that I got was a copy of Arlen, Voice of the Pack. So it is a 2 green and 4 colorless, and each creature you control that's a wolf or werewolf enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. 7 loyalty to start, and -2 create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So it's actually a 3/3 wolf creature token every single time. And if you have them both on the board, because I pulled an extra one, that makes them 4/4 wolf tokens every single turn. And then I also have Arlen's Wolf in here as well, which got +1/+1 counters. And I thought I had one more wolf, but maybe not. Nope, I guess not. So that's 2 of my Planeswalkers that I had. And then my last Planeswalker that I pulled was Nissa, who shakes the world. For 5 mana, green, and 3 colorless, whenever you tap a forest for mana, add an additional green, which I forgot to use that ability, but that's okay. So the static ability, really pay attention. It's 5 loyalty, and put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target non-creature land you control. Untap it, becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with vigilance and haste, and it's still a land. This allowed me to do a bunch of damage and won me a bunch of games. Basically, when Nissa hit the board, if they didn't have an immediate way to deal with it, then more than likely I won that game. -8, you get an emblem with lands you control are indestructible. Search your library for any number of forest cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. I never got to Ultima Nissa. However, I did have her in one game up to 10 loyalty, and I was going to ultimate her the next turn because I'd already plussed her, and then I had proliferated a bunch of times. And because I wanted another 3/3 land, I only had 2 of them out. But they died. I did 25 to their face in that round, and they had no way to deal with it. Now, the next part is, what did we use to make this deck run? So I got 2 non-basic lands and the rest were basic. The first was 1 copy of Emergency Zone. So this allows you to cast any spell this turn as though they had flash. I told you that I used the Callous Dismissal once to save one of my own creatures, which allowed me to win the game. It was with an Emergent Zone combo. Somebody tried to go after my Roll-esque and give it -5/-5 and kill it. So I tapped out my Emergent Zone, sacked it, Callous Dismissaled my own Roll-esque back to my own hand, which then made their spell fizzle, and then I recast my Roll-esque the next turn and put another 2 counters on another creature I had. So it was a win-win for me. And then the last card that I got was a copy of Karn's Bastion. So this card's great, however, not so great in a sealed environment. There wasn't any games where this was the winning card. This is what allowed me to win. There's a bunch of other cards and a bunch of other rares I would have rather have had in place of Karn's Bastion. But in Commander, this card's just going to be broken. It's going to be wonderful, and it's going to go in a Commander deck. Now, on top of it, what we ran was 7 islands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 7 islands. And 8 forests. This was our land base to make the whole deck run. So yes, I ran a 41 card deck. I decided to go that route just because I wanted that Arboreal Grazer in there because it's almost a wash if you get it. It's almost as if it pays for itself. So this is the deck I played. Like I said, it won me many rounds. The rounds that I basically lost to were against people who pulled much better pulls than I did. I'm using most of the cards that I could even possibly come up with to be able to build this deck. I didn't have a lot of other choices or outs. This is what I was dealt, and this is what I built with, and this is what I played. But when this deck went off, it went off hard. I had multiple turns or multiple games where I'd have 3, 4, 5 wolves on the field and 2 or 3 3/3 lands on the field, and just a board state that would make anybody jealous in a pre-release. Now, like I said, my biggest problem was this Apex hybrid being a creature and being a 4/5. And having that 4 power, it was easily removed by things like Teo, the Shield Bearer, or the black card that gives creatures -5/-5, or any of the other exile cards. So this was a downfall. It was easier to remove this creature because of the way it's built rather than it is to remove something like a Planeswalker. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I can't wait for the next pre-release and whatever the next set's going to be. I seriously doubt if there's a pre-release for New Horizons because it's more of a master set than a release set. So I will look forward to that, and you'll have the option of looking at my War of the Spark box openings as they come out. I already did one today. There will be one next week, and then there will be one the week following to do the box in thirds. So if you want to see that, hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so that way you know when that video goes live. I hope you all had a great pre-release weekend, and if you didn't go to pre-release, a great weekend anyways. And as always, may Keep Calm Kitty be with you. Good night, everybody.